Phase 4 of the MCU has really started to branch out and lay the seeds for an exciting array of new team-ups that aren't just the normal Avengers. You have Valentina Allegra de Fontaine's growing group of Dark Avengers, you have General Ross's potential version of the Thunderbolts, and you have the Young Avengers. Basically a group of heroes who probably don't know that there was once a time when Netflix was solely a place to rent DVDs. It's the Young Avengers who I want to focus on today. I want to talk about all the potential heroes we've met already, like Speed and Wiccan, who could fill the ranks, as well as discuss the exciting new heroes like Iron Lad, who could make a big impact. Let's get started right now. I think with any new team, it's important to have some established faces in order to help ease the audience in. A big criticism for the Eternals movie is that it introduces all these new characters at once, and while that was hard to avoid, it might have been easier if we had someone familiar to anchor everything together. So when it comes time for the Young Avengers, I think there's a member of the current Avengers who would make a perfect fit for the new team, and that's of course your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Although Tom Holland looks quite youthful for his age, he's still 25 years old, and so it's easy to forget that this version of Peter Parker is still only around 16 years old. That's the perfect age for the Young Avengers. And I know what you're thinking. If Peter is already an established member of the regular Avengers, why would he seemingly downgrade to join the Young Avengers? Well, I have a solution for that. What if Spider-Man was the leader of the Young Avengers? He could be the one recruiting everyone and working to keep them all together, while also being the main liaison between this new team and the OG Avengers. I like this idea because it continues to give Peter a fantastic character arc in the MCU. He started this journey being recruited by Tony Stark and then worked under him as his protege until Tony's demise in Endgame. Then Peter had to work through his grief and learn how to be his own hero in Far From Home. So logically, the final step of this arc would see Peter take on a Tony Stark role and offer his guidance and leadership skills to the next generation of heroes. So this would work great, unless the whole multiverse mess Peter finds himself in takes him away from the MCU forever. In that case, someone surprising could lead the team, but I'll mention that a bit later. For now, let's talk about more official members. A hero we're going to be talking about a lot soon is Kate Bishop. It looks like she'll successfully take over the Hawkeye mantle by the time the Hawkeye TV series wraps up, and honestly that's fitting. Clint Barton has been through so much in the MCU, and after everything he endured during the events of Infinity War and Endgame, it's about time the character got a happy ending, which leaves Kate Bishop as the MCU's premier archer. But after Kate presumably becomes the new Hawkeye, where exactly will she pop up next? A spot on the official Avengers seems a little far-fetched, right? I mean, Hawkeye only got the spot because he was in close proximity to the events of the first Avengers movie. Be honest, if Hawkeye had taken a sick day when Loki came to Earth and wasn't brainwashed, would he still hang out with Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor? I just don't think so. But okay, what about Kate Bishop? In the comics, Kate Bishop basically joined the Young Avengers by accident. She was attending her sister's wedding when bad guys attacked. The then established Young Avengers swooped in, but only managed to make things worse and got captured. It was Kate who happened to save them, and then afterwards, she basically demanded that she become a member. Now, I don't really see this storyline playing out in the MCU show. The way I envision it, Clint will end the show by teaching Kate one last lesson: to learn to work well with others. He'll talk about how much the Avengers meant to him and encourage Kate to find her own team, leading to Kate actively looking for more people her age range to fight crime together. I think that could work, right? The Loki TV show delivered a lot of fun surprises, but the best had to be the reveal of all the different variants of Loki that existed in the void. Obviously, Alligator Loki was the MVP and should be just as beloved as Baby Yoda and deserves its own spin-off show, but that's a video for a different time. Anyway, the other variants included Boastful Loki, Classic Loki, and Kid Loki. Now, this whole setup was interesting. Not only was Kid Loki heralded as the most powerful Loki variant among them, but then he also conveniently left the battlefield right when the good guys faced off against Goliath. Given that we didn't get any sort of resolution for this character, chances are he's still out there, and really the perfect spot for him would be the Young Avengers. Not sure how exactly he'd get to our universe and time, but once he's there, he'd be such a fun wild card for the group. It's not a bad thing to have a superhero team filled with absolutely heroic good guys, but I think that misses the opportunity to cause a little chaos. Putting Kid Loki on the Young Avengers not only gives the group a powerful Asgardian guardian on their side, but also would lead to a fascinating character journey. We know that Kid Loki took out his brother Thor in his timeline, and perhaps that guilt starts to weigh on him a bit. Maybe he wants to make amends and start being the hero that he knows his brother would want. Plus, Kid Loki means we'd get double the Loki in the MCU, and that's never a bad thing. WandaVision introduced us to Wanda and Vision's twin boys, and hey, as it turns out, they both developed powers. Well, I guess the more accurate term is that Wanda gave them powers, as this was all part of her reality warping, but then of course the ending suggested that the kids were actually alive in some other universe or dimension or something. Anyways, let's talk about how each of them would affect the Young Avengers. First, I present Speed. Now, Speed obviously takes after his uncle Quicksilver, and that his power comes from super speed. And I'll just come right out and say it, I think super speed is the most OP problem on any superhero team where it's almost problematic. Like, the speedster either has to be nerfed in a way where they couldn't immediately end the fight, or the writers have to make the speedster seem less powerful than they actually are. But I actually think the Speed character on the Young Avengers can fix this problem. The point with Speed is that he's young and still learning to get a handle on his powers. They could present it where he may not know the extent of his super speed or have trouble controlling how fast he goes. This paints Speed as the character on the Young Avengers who's clearly one of the most powerful, but also the one who has the farthest to go in terms of mastering their powers. You see, the Young Avengers can be the most interesting and complex super team in the MCU. Now, let's talk about Wanda's other kid. Wiccan is an extremely powerful warlock, and that's not an exaggeration. It's been revealed that Wiccan in the comics is actually a force of life and magic who, when he comes of age, will totally change the rules of magic, and in this way, he could be a lot like his brother Speed and have this immense power that he's afraid he can lose control of. I think when it comes down to it, the running theme of the Young Avengers should be these incredibly powerful heroes who just don't know how to properly control or utilize their powers yet. Like, what would you do if you knew you could one day become as powerful as a god? Would you embrace it or be a little scared about how you could potentially control the universe one day? That's the conflict I want to see. Oh, and I want to see him and Kid Loki do magic together. That's another requirement. I think every team needs an Iron Man-esque character. You know, the kind that doesn't necessarily have powers, but is smart enough to build amazing tech and weapons for the rest of the team. That's where Ironheart comes into play. Riri Williams is getting her own show, and unless the title is straight up lying to us, I would say it's a pretty safe bet that she's going to become Ironheart in it. But after her season wraps up, what's the best place for her? Again, because she's so young, I don't think she'd fit in with the rest of the regular Avengers, so that's why she should use her skills to team up with the Young Avengers. Riri could be one of the most vital members of the team, using her genius IQ to not only pilot her own Ironheart suit, but also supply the team with a high-tech base of operations. She could technically be the man in the chair character, but also be the one who's smart enough to keep the team in line, organized, and help them know where to go in order to fight crime. Plus, if Spider-Man is the leader of the team, like I mentioned earlier, it could present a great opportunity for those two to develop a mentor-mentee relationship, which would be an interesting flip on the Iron Man-Spider-Man dynamic. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier introduced us to the heartbreaking story of Isaiah Bradley, a black super soldier who didn't have as revered a role in history like Steve Rogers. That's putting it mildly. But during Isaiah's scenes, we met another potential Young Avenger member, Eli Bradley, who in the comics is a hero that goes by the name Patriot. Now, this would be yet another fascinating character to add a new dynamic to things. In the beginning, Eli claimed he had super soldier blood in him, when in fact he didn't. How interesting would a scenario be if the character joined the team but actually was harboring that dark secret? Of course, that's a really hard secret to keep because it should be obvious rather quickly that Eli is extra squishy like a normal human, so maybe the easier thing to do would just be to have him get a blood transfusion from his grandfather. Then hey, look at that, you have a super soldier on the Young Avengers. Cassie Lang, aka Stature, is Scott Lang's daughter, and in the comics, she doesn't take long in stepping into her father's shrinking boots. She, along with Kate Bishop, weren't part of the original group of Young Avengers, but was so adamant about joining that she basically demanded she be led in the group. Turns out she'd been stealing Pym particles for years, and the effects allow her to grow and shrink in size. As I keep saying, I think the Young Avengers would truly shine because of the characters' relationships with each other. I could see Stature forming a bond with Speed and Wiccan since both of their parents are official Avengers, and all of them struggle to step out of their parents' shadow. That might be hard for Stature since Ant-Man can grow into Giant Man, but let's not forget that in the comics, Stature has been shown to grow even bigger than her father when needed. Okay, you hear Iron Lad and you immediately think of another version of Iron Man, but Iron Lad is so much more complicated than that. This character is actually a Nathaniel Richards from a different universe, and through complicated comic booky explanation, he's actually a young King the Conqueror who exists in the 30th century. And the fear of turning into such a massive criminal scares him, so he ends up going back in time to eventually form the Young Avengers and try to stop his dark future. He models himself after Iron Man and takes the moniker Iron Lad. And although he's similar to Ironheart, where on the surface it would be weird to have both these characters on a team, his character is so interesting that I think it's important to make space. Not only would seeing a Kang variant desperately try to not turn into Kang the Conqueror tie in directly with the larger conflict the MCU is creating, but it also gives us one of the most unique perspectives from a new character that we've ever seen in the MCU. What would you do if you knew you'd grow up to be one of the worst villains of all time? How hard would you try to be a hero in order to change it? I think those are good questions. We know the Kree and the Skrull have a major conflict in the MCU, but what if you had a character who was torn about both sides? Hulkling is a half Kree, half Skrull, and the result of the Kree version of Captain Marvel having relations with the Skrull princess, and the result is Hulkling. His main power, besides super strength and durability, is his ability to shapeshift. A shapeshifter is always a great asset on the team, and this one comes with a nice, juicy backstory that adds yet another fun dynamic to the team. Imagine Hulkling and Stature going on stealth missions together, a shrinker and a shapeshifter, sign me up. And fun fact, Hulkling also ends up marrying Wiccan in the comics, so there's the team romance angle we might have been missing in this group. Alright, I'm putting Miss Marvel on this list, but like Riri Williams, she isn't a normal member of the Young Avengers in the comics, and yet could easily fit right in for the MCU's version of the team. The Disney Plus Day brief teaser showed us that Kamala Khan idolizes Carol Danvers, and when she gets her powers, tries to emulate her hero. She's basically sorta like Mr. Fantastic in that she can extend her limbs and basically stretch her body so that she can shapeshift. Now, although the Young Avengers could really benefit from having her on the team, there are two things to consider here. For one, Miss Marvel might be too busy to join the Young Avengers, as she's currently set to not only star in her own show, but also co-star in the Captain Marvel sequel, The Marvels. On top of that, I think Hulkling is vital to the Young Avengers, and that means we'd have 2 shapeshifters on the team, and that just seems like overload. Still, I wouldn't be opposed to Miss Marvel dropping in every now and then as a temporary member. Again, I think building up the multiverse is what the MCU is working toward in Phase 4, and that's where Miss America can come in. Real name America Chavez, the superhero has the interesting power of being able to directly punch star-shaped holes into different universes and travel between them. That's wild, but also she's carrying a dark secret. Thanks to Kid Loki, Miss America knows that Wiccan is actually one day fated to become so powerful that he destroys the world, and decides to secretly protect him to try to stop that from happening. Imagine the team having 2 vital members in Iron Lad and Miss America who understand the multiverse, and her powers allow the team to have a lot of different adventures in any timeline imaginable. The possibilities are endless. Oh, did you know the character is set to make her live-action debut in Doctor Strange's sequel? Coincidence? I think not. Look, Harley Keener will probably not return to the MCU. Hey, I get it. After Iron Man 3, I wanted to see more of the character, and when I saw Endgame, I thought him appearing at Tony's funeral was laying the foundation for him to have a big role going forward. But let's be real, with Ironheart right around the corner, and even Spider-Man filling the former Iron Man protege role, there's just not a place for him. But okay, I'll throw him a bone. In the comics, there's an issue where the Harley Keener character jumps into cyberspace and gets his own Iron Man-esque suit. So sure, maybe Harley can be their official man in the chair when Riri Williams is out fighting alongside the rest of the Young Avengers. Finally, I want to discuss Vision. Yeah, sure, I guess technically Vision is young enough to be in the Young Avengers, but that's a discussion for a whole different day. I mentioned earlier that someone other than Spider-Man could lead the team, and I think Vision could fill that slot well. And most importantly, I'm talking about White Vision, who we last saw regaining his memories and flying off to parts unknown at the end of WandaVision. Before I discuss how this works, it's important to note 2 comic storylines. In the comics, Vision was responsible for establishing the West Coast Avengers, and then also another version of Vision was also partly responsible for the Young Avengers. So because the MCU likes mixing and matching storylines, what if the West Coast Avengers and the Young Avengers become the same thing in the MCU, and saw White Vision overseeing seeing everything. Having a bunch of teenagers report to a sentient synthezoid would certainly create an interesting dynamic and also further White Vision's character arc. He seems to be at the stage where he doesn't know what to do now, given that he knows he isn't the original Vision, but has Vision's memories and might want to try training a new group of heroes in order to do good in the world. It would be a great way to keep the character of Vision around and put him in an interesting new environment. Plus, if the new Vision is struggling with human emotions, what better way to make him care than appointing him the leader of a group of superhero teens? What city do you think Young Avengers should be based in? I do think the MCU should merge the idea of the West Coast Avengers with the Young Avengers and have them be somewhere in California. Come on, New York is just getting way too crowded nowadays. Time to give the heroes some breathing room.